Thank you, Sheriff. You all may be seated. Good morning, members of the jury. You will recall that we are in the state's case in chief. Mr. Sykes, please call your first witness.
Call Nick Webb, Your Honor.
Sir, if you would please come in front of the courtroom. Before you have a seat, you may raise your right hand. I swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth.
I do.
Please have a seat and respond to questions from Mr. Sykes. You'll take the witness for the defense. Thank you. That's Mr. Webb. You may proceed with it.
Thank you, Judge. Please state your full name, spell your name for the record.
Nick Webb, Nick Webb.
How are you currently employed, sir?
I'm co-owner and vice president of TexFact LLC. It's a forensic consulting and training company.
Explain to the jury what a forensic consulting and training company does.
Primarily, we teach law enforcement officers forensic disciplines such as bloodstain pattern analysis, shooting reconstruction, crime scene investigation, and so forth. We do take a few consulting cases where we're asked to answer specific questions regarding a case, such as this case. That's typically not something I need to do.
We'll get to the substance of this in a moment, but did I ask you to assist us with this case?
Yes, you did.
All right. Do you have law enforcement background?
I do.
Can you explain that to the ladies and gentlemen?
Sure. I've been a law enforcement officer for about 28 years. I spent the majority of my career in municipal law enforcement, held ranks from patrol officer to lieutenant, and retired and then went to county law enforcement as investigator for a sheriff's office. And the majority of my career, over 16 years of it, has been in an investigative capacity.
Have you held any academic positions, sir?
I am an associate instructor for the University of Northern Colorado as a subject matter expert.
Have you ever attended the FBI National Academy?
I have.
What is that exactly?
The FBI National Academy is an executive leadership training that's 10 weeks on site.
What certifications and licenses do you have, sir?
I have a Master Peace Officer license, and I also hold certifications as a police training officer, as well as firearms instructor.
Have you made professional presentations in the past, sir?
Yes, I have.
Can you explain that to the ladies and gentlemen?
I've done hundreds of law enforcement training seminars, and obviously in those seminars come professional presentations on the subject matter.
Have you testified as an expert in the past?
I have.
Can you explain that generally to the jury?
I've testified as a subject matter expert in bloodstain pattern analysis, shooting reconstruction, fingerprint identification, as well as collision reconstruction.
What training have you received that makes you qualified to testify as an expert here in this case?
I've received two different basic 40-hour shooting reconstruction courses. One was from Ed Heesky, who actually wrote the book Practical Shooting Reconstruction, as well as one from FBI. I've also attended two separate advanced shooting reconstruction courses.
Directing your attention to July 13th, 2017, did members of the Dallas Sheriff's Office ask you to assist them in this case?
Yes.
And what did they ask you to do?
They asked simply that we come and view the vehicle to see if there was any evidence of an additional bullet strike that they had not already located.
Your testimony today, is this based on your knowledge of the case, your examination of the subject vehicle, and not from something you heard from someone else?
Yes.
So, what did you do on July 13, 2017 with regard to this case?
Well, I traveled to Dallas County Sheriff's Office It's actually the livestock arena where they have a storage facility, and viewed the vehicle. And as I was viewing the vehicle, I noticed a suspicious scuff on the lower rocker panel of the passenger door.
And Judge, I believe you said throughout the trial that you approached the witness.
Okay. Yes, sir. Both sides.
I just handed you State's Exhibit 249. I asked if you recognize that.
That would be my report, yes, sir.
And did you prepare a report
I did.
in the regular course of business?
I did.
Does it have any statements from anybody else contained in that report?
Only the certification for peer review. This should be on the last page.
We offer 249, Judge.
Mr. Gill, any objection?
May I ask a couple of questions?
Sure. You take the witness number.
Thank you. Mr. Webb, of course, you prepared this report at some time in the past, is that right?
That's correct.
Approximately when did you prepare the report?
December 5th, 2017.
No, we object. It's hearsay, and we expect it to be cumulative of the testimony he presents here in court. It's just not admissible.
All right. Let me, if I could please, see State's 249. Mr. Spicer, please. Those objections are overruled. 249 is admitted for all purposes. Would you like a running objection?
Yes, sir. Can I get back to the room? Sure.
The paint and underlying plastic on the lower rocker panel.
We may not have covered this. Were you basically asked to see if we could figure out where the fifth shot had landed?
Yes, basically.
Okay. And what do you mean by that, basically?
I mean, I was just asked to see if there was any evidence of an additional shot that they hadn't been able to locate. They had determined through video analysis that there was an additional shot fired somewhere that they had not yet located. And what we were asked to do is see if there was any evidence on the vehicle that could be associated with that.
What about this scuff was suspicious to you?
I've seen it multiple times with regards to deflections or ricochets, if you will.
Where was this scuff located?
It's just below the front passenger door on the plastic rocker panel, just below it.
Okay. Did you see anything that led you to believe one way or the other that this might be a bullet defect?
Yes, I did notice that it was atypical in shape, which means it's not circular or elliptical as we would expect, which might indicate that the bullet was tumbling. And additionally, I noticed that it had a back-to-front direction of travel.
What's the significance of your testimony that the defect indicated that the bullet was tumbling?
The significance is that since it was an atypical defect, it was oddly shaped, which is customary. It's expected with a tumbling bullet that may or may not be deformed at the time it strikes the surface.
Do you know what a bullet hole test kit is?
Yes, I do.
Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what that is.
A bullet hole test kit is simply a test. It's a field test, much like they use on drugs from a patrol standpoint. But a bullet hole test kit actually just tests for the presence of copper and lead.
Copper and lead. What's the significance of copper and lead with regard to your examination?
Well, typically bullets are covered with a thin layer of copper as a jacket to help them create less friction and deform less while flying through the air. And Additionally, there's also vaporized lead that accumulates on that copper jacket. And in cases such as this, when the jacket has been stripped off due to contact with some intermediary target, then that leaves a misshapen lead core flying through the air, so it may deposit lead on the target surface as well.
Did you use the bullet hole test kit to perform a test in this case?
I did.
Can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury about that?
There was two suspect areas. There was one that I already referred to that was just underneath the front passenger door. And we performed a copper and lead test on that. It tested negative for copper and positive for lead. And that's certainly something that we would expect if it had made contact and deflected upward from the road surface, since the road is fairly abrasive. We also tested a second, smaller defect that was almost at the edge of the door on that same plastic rocker panel, and that one tested negative for both copper and lead.
Does the test employ a color change?
It does.
Tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury about that.
The color change is the indication that copper or lead is present. It's a green color, immediate green color change for copper and an immediate magenta color change for lead.
What was the result of the test for copper?
It was negative.
And what was the result of the test for lead?
It was positive on the initial defect and negative on the secondary defect.
Now, does the fact that it was negative for copper, does that indicate that there was not a bullet strike?
No.
Okay, can you explain that to the ladies and gentlemen?
As I said, typically when a bullet strikes a non-yielding surface that's abrasive in nature, such as asphalt, then that thin layer of copper is very easily stripped off of the bullet, and that leaves two projectiles, at least, leaving that scene. It can also pick up shrapnel in the form of gravel or pieces of the roadway or whatever the secondary target was, and carry them along the same path as the bullet.
Did you review any photographs of the first suspected defect?
I did.
Okay, and tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury about that.
I reviewed some macro photography as well as some photographs that were taken at the scene. One of the things that I wanted to ensure by viewing the photographs at the scene was that the defects that I was seeing when inspecting the vehicle were actually there prior to the vehicle being placed on a wrecker and moved from the scene.
Why is that important?
Well, I wanted to make sure that it was something that could be logically considered rather than something that could have happened after the fact.
And does that include an examination of photographs that were actually taken out at Bishop Lane on the night of April 29, 2017?
Yes.
And in your report, is the scuff that you've described actually visible on the undercarriage of that car?
It is.
Did you also review the defendant's body camera video?
I did.
What was the purpose of that?
I wanted to see what approximate angles the defendant would have been in at the time the shots were fired in order to see if it was even possible for that deflection to occur and struck the vehicle at that approximate angle.
And what conclusions, if any, did you reach with regard to the first shot from the defendant?
I was able to exclude the first shot as having been a possibility.
As you reviewed that body cam, can you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what angle it appears that the fifth shot would have been fired at?
The fifth shot would have been at a very acute angle, so a very shallow angle relative to the vehicle. If you will, if this is the vehicle, it's visible in the camera that he would have been offset somewhere to the right side of it, but at a very shallow angle.
So do you have an opinion as to whether the defect that you saw came from the firing of the fifth shot?
I do. I think based on the evidence that was available to me, the best explanation is that it would have been from the fifth shot.
Do you have an opinion for the ladies and gentlemen of the jury whether that shot ricocheted before hitting the Chevrolet Impala?
Yes.
Okay, what is your opinion?
I believe that it did ricochet, likely off the pavement,
And why do you think that?
because I see no other object or intermediary target for it to deflect off of, and that would allow for the upward and forward bullet strike that we see.
So in sum, fifth shot, in your opinion, is the one that you've described,
Yes,
and that ricocheted off of the pavement, and that's why the copper was separated.
yes,
And you're confident that this presence of lead, along with your other examinations, concludes that the fifth shot struck the vehicle after ricocheting off the pavement.
yes.
That's what.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Morning, Mr. Webb.
Good morning.
How are you this morning?
Doing very well.
Good. And also from your observations of the video from Officer Oliver's body cam, you also know that Officer Oliver had dropped his weapon at the time of the fifth shot. Is that correct?
I don't recall seeing that, but it's logical, yes.
Well, he would have to if the fifth shot hit the pavement out there. Isn't that right?
Well, yes, but I don't know whether it would be perceivable on the video or not.
But it's logical that if the fifth shot hit the pavement before it hit the vehicle, that shot was fired in a downward direction.
Yes, slightly downward, yes.
And officer, it was represented to you by members of the Dallas County Sheriff's Office that it was in fact Roy Oliver that fired those shots. Is that correct?
Yes.
Because you didn't know Roy Oliver before you began this investigation, did you?
No, sir.
And when you arrived at the livestock building, the livestock center on July the 13th, you met some Dallas County Sheriff's investigators there, isn't that right?
Yes, sir.
Investigator Whaley,
Yes, sir.
Investigator Fassett,
Yes, sir.
and they gave you a rundown on what they had, didn't they?
Yes.
They gave that to you verbally, right?
Yes.
Because the whole purpose of you being there was to see if you could verify on that vehicle that there was a fifth shot fired.
Basically.
And you didn't receive any of the written materials that you received or any of the video until after you had made an inspection of that vehicle. Is that right?
That's correct.
And after you inspected the vehicle and gave them a preliminary opinion, that they then provided you with some documents and some video to enhance your opinion. Is that right?
Yes and no, Counselor. I'd like to explain that if you'll allow.
Go ahead.
I wasn't actually provided with any materials with regards to this case, photographic or written, until after we were actually retained, which was months later.
Okay. So you went out on July the 13th to give a preliminary opinion, and then once that preliminary opinion was rendered, you were hired after that.
Months later, yes.
And after you were hired, you received a crime scene report from the Dallas County Sheriff's Office.
Yes, sir.
You received some crime scene sketches from the
Yes, sir.
Dallas County Sheriff's Office.
Yes, sir.
You received some photographs, some crime scene photographs from them.
Yes.
And you received some more detailed photographs of a suspected bullet defect from them. Is that right?
Yes.
And that's what you referred to as the macro with a close-up of the rocker panel. Is that
Yes.
right? You received body cam video of Officer Oliver and body cam video of Officer Gross.
That's correct.
And just to be clear for the record purposes and for this jury, the vehicle you inspected on July the 13th was a 2004 Chevrolet Impala. Is that right?
That's correct.
And the Dallas County Sheriff's Office represented to you that that was the vehicle that was involved in the case we're here litigating right now. Is that right?
Yes.
And did you just look at the rocker panel, or did you look at the entire vehicle?
No, I began by looking at the entire vehicle.
And you noticed in your inspection that there are some other bullet defects on that vehicle. Is that right?
That's correct.
And basically, did you notice that there were basically 4 entry gunshot defects to that vehicle?
Yes.
And did you also notice that there was one that was apparently an exit defect?
Yes.
Do you recall generally where those defects were located?
There was an entry into the right side of the windshield just in front of the A-pillar from the passenger side toward the driver's side, and there was an exit on the driver's side just in front of the A-pillar in the windshield as well. Additionally, there was an entry into the front passenger window, I believe. Honestly, I don't really recall at this moment exactly where they were.
Is that just not important to your analysis?
Well, I wasn't asked to perform analysis on that.
Okay, but you were asked to inspect the vehicle, weren't you?
Yes.
And apparently the Dallas County Sheriff's Office, did they or did they not know where there was another possible defect on that vehicle?
I'm sorry, can you restate your
Well,
question?
did they direct you to the rocker panel, or did they ask you to walk around the vehicle and have a look for yourself?
No, they asked me to walk around the vehicle and have a look for myself.
Okay. And was it you that noticed the defect on the rocker panel?
Yes.
And that defect on, tell the jury first of all, what is a rocker panel?
It's just a piece of plastic trim that is located just below the door.
And it basically runs from wheel well to wheel well underneath the doors, is that right?
Yes, sir.
So it is the bottommost outward facing part of the body of that vehicle, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, it's the lowest body part between those two wheels, isn't that right?
Yes.
And all of the other defects that you noticed in that vehicle were substantially higher on the vehicle, isn't that right?
That's correct, yes.
And do you recall all of the other defects basically being in a line from either right to left or left to right?
Yes.
The other four defects were on a fairly level line at the top of the doors and just above the doors, is that right?
For me, the top of the door would be where the window stops. So just to be fair, if we sit above the midline or the center line of the vehicle, midway up the door, then yes, it would be above that line.
And the defect that you noticed in the rocker panel is on the lowest part of the vehicle, is that right?
That is correct.
And the officers from the Dallas County Sheriff's Office, I might have asked this already, they represented to you that is the vehicle that was involved in this case.
Yes, they did.
And you don't have any reason to doubt that, do you?
No.
Now, you also said that you viewed some photographs of that vehicle out at the scene.
That's correct.
Any doubt in your mind it was the same vehicle?
It appears to be from the context of the photograph.
And also from the context of the photograph, you know that you were able to visualize a defect, at least a scuff mark on that vehicle as it sat out at the scene on Bishop. Is that right?
Yes.
And it was in relatively the same position as you noticed the defect in your inspection on July the 13th.
Yes.
And you were able to confirm that some months after, correct? You yourself never went out to that scene on Bishop, did you?
No.
You never went out to the scene at the corner of Shepherd and Barron Drive in Ball Springs, did you?
No.
So your work here was limited to inspecting the actual vehicle and then looking at the materials that were provided by the Sheriff's Office.
That's correct.
Your testimony to the jury was that the scuff mark that you noticed was consistent with that vehicle having been struck by something in motion.
That's correct.
And that's even more apparent when you look at the close-up photograph of the defect on the rocker panel. Isn't that correct?
Yes.
And you actually see what appears to be a scuff mark.
Yes.
A mark that's created by something that has striations in it or variations in its height or depth.
I would agree with that.
And that also is consistent with your testimony that you believe that vehicle to have been struck by a projectile that had been altered by an intermediary target.
Yes.
Because when a projectile strikes an intermediary target, such as a roadway, it causes some type of distortion or damage to the projectile.
That's correct.
Is that fair? And in this case, it looked like from your analysis, since you found lead but not copper, that the jacket might have actually separated from the rest of the projectile.
Yes.
And that is certainly consistent with it having struck an intermediary target such as a roadway.
Yes.
But you were unable to confirm that the second smaller defect that you found was either lead or copper, is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
But did it look to you like it was also caused around the same time as the primary defect you were looking at?
It did appear that way.
We pass the witness.
Mr. Sykes?
Very briefly, Judge. You indicated to the jury that you had examined some photographs, was further confirmation.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to show you now what's marked as State's Exhibits 281 and 126. Do you recognize those as being the photographs that you examined?
Yes.
We offer State's Exhibits 126 and 281.
You don't have any objection.
All right, 126 and 281 are admitted for all purposes. You may publish, Mr. Sykes.
Showing you State's Exhibit 281, and can you explain to the jury where you saw the scuff mark on the 2004 Chevrolet Impala?
Actually, that's not the best example of it. The other photo is a much better example that you can visualize it.
Is that the vehicle?
Yes.
Okay. All right, that states 126 for the record.
Okay. If we can zoom in right there where he's going. Now you can see, whoop, right there. You can see the longer defect, and there was another one just to the left of it.
You can touch that screen to your left if you need to, sir.
Oh, okay. Hey, that's even better. Okay. As you can see, this area right here is actually unrelated. This is the actual scuff in question, and the secondary was actually right back here.
Let me ask you, just to kind of conclude, does a gunshot that ricochets off of pavement put people at risk?
Yes.
Why would that be?
It still contains energy. It's still a flying projectile.
So it could still hurt somebody pretty bad.
Sure.
That's what it's Judge.
Mr. Hill?
Thank you, Your Honor. Are you a member of any professional organizations?
No.
Are you familiar with the Association of Firearms and Tool Mark Examiners?
Yes, sir.
Have you ever read their journal?
Yes.
You do so on a frequent basis?
Fairly often. I'm not a member, so I don't receive the journal consistently.
It's certainly something you'd like to read from time to time. It helps you inform you in your profession, doesn't it?
Sure.
And you indicated you received quite a bit of training from Mr. Ed Heesky.
Yes.
Are there some other authoritative publications in that field that you rely on from time to time?
I can't name anything in specific for you, Counselor, but I'm always reading other documentation anytime someone comes up with additional information that might benefit me.
Are you familiar with this publication
I don't believe I've read that.
entitled Shooting Incident Reconstruction?
Did Michael Haig write that?
Well, his name is Lucian Haig.
That's Michael's father.
Okay.
No, I haven't read that one in particular.
Okay, but you're familiar with the Michael Haig?
Yes.
Is that right? Lucian Haig being his father?
Mr. Gill, could you do the court reporter a favor and spell the name of him and then,
H-A-H-E.
well, the first one, really, that's
Lucian is spelled L-U-C-I-E-N.
not.
Michael, common spelling. And you also mentioned that you're a firearms instructor?
Yes, I am.
And how long have you been a firearms instructor?
Since 2001 or 2, I believe.
Is your instruction primarily of law enforcement officers?
It's exclusively law enforcement officers.
And if an officer is firing a rifle, are there some specific behaviors that an officer should undertake in firing a rifle, and especially concluding his firing of the rifle?
I'm not sure I understand your question, Counselor.
Well, we talked earlier about the fact that as Mr. Oliver was firing, that he dropped his rifle at the end of the firing sequence.
Yes.
Explain that to the jury.
The muzzle of the rifle would have had to have been pointed slightly downward in order for the bullet to actually make contact with the roadway and not with the car or above or around the car.
And is dropping a weapon like that at the end of a firing sequence, bringing that weapon down into a safer position?
Let me make sure I understand your question, Counselor. Would dropping the muzzle at the end of a firing sequence make the rifle pointed in a safer position?
Yes, sir.
Is that what you're asking? Yes.
Yes, sir. Pointing a rifle down is what we've all been taught to do when you don't want to have that rifle in a firing position. Is that correct?
That's correct.
We pass the witness.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Sir, you may stand down. May this witness be finally excused.
From the state, yes, sir.
Yes, Your Honor.
Sir, you may stand down. You're excused from further service. Mr. Snipes, call your next witness, please.
Call the ESO Whaley.
And Mr. Webb. Mr. Webb. There was another person that you took training from. You used his last name, I believe it's H.
Huskey.
Can you spell that for her?
H-U-E-S-K-E.
Thank you, please.
You're welcome.
You asked me about it.
I did see mine.
Hey, yes, sir. Whenever you put that down, you could please raise your right hand. You swear the testimony you're about to give will be true.
I did.
Please have a seat. Will you respond to the questions from your side? That's what you're right. And perhaps also Mr. Brissett, who is the man in the middle of the class. You may proceed with the measure.
Please state your full name for the record, spell your first and last name.
Garrick Whaley, Garrick, Whaley.
How are you currently employed, sir?
I'm a detective with the Physical Evidence Section of the Dallas County Sheriff's Department.
What are your duties as a detective with the Physical Evidence Section?
Excuse me. Primary duties are to collect, document, and preserve physical evidence
For what purpose?
for court proceeding
And how long have you had that job?
since 2002.
Since 2002?
Yes, sir.
When did you first give with the Dallas County Sheriff's Office?
I was hired in the Sheriff's Department in 1994 as a detention officer. I was a detention officer for 4 years, and then I made deputy in 1998.
Okay. And what was it that caused you to shift from being a detention officer to being a crime scene detective?
It was something I was interested in.
What about it interested you?
Just the generality of it, just looking for evidence. It tends to be a very factual thing. It's not based on any kind of subjective material.
Prior to the night of April 29, 2017, April 30th, 2017, had you processed crime scenes in the past?
Yes, sir.
Any idea how many?
Ones that I was lead on, probably 500 to 600. Ones I've assisted other officers, probably over 1,000.
Have you testified in court before?
Yes, sir.
Any idea how many times on that?
Anywhere from 50 to 100 times.
Let me take you back to the week of April the 29th, 2017. Were you the on-call detective for the Dallas Sheriff's Office that week?
Yes, sir, I was.
What does that mean?
We only have 5 detectives in our office. We don't have enough to run a 24/7. So each week, once every 5th week, you have to serve a week on call. So during the downtime, when we don't have anybody on duty, if a call comes in, that person responds.
Before I forget to ask you this, the testimony that you're giving to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury here today, is that from your personal knowledge of what you saw out at the scene on April 29th?
Yes, sir.
April 30th? Okay. So, did you receive a phone call asking you to go out to a crime scene located at the intersection of Barron Drive and Shepherd Lane, and another crime scene located over at Bishop Lane in Balch Springs, Texas, sometime either late on the night of April 29th or in the early morning hours of April 30th?
Yes, sir, I did.
Do you recall approximately what time it was?
If I can refer to my report, I received a call on April 30th at 12:03 a.m.
Okay, so 3 minutes after midnight.
Correct.
And not for the truth of the matter asserted, but to show the jury what the basis of your further action was, what were you told you were reporting out there for?
I was told there was an officer-involved shooting.
And if it's in Balch Springs, why would you be needing to go out there?
Balch Springs doesn't have a dedicated crime scene unit. They often call us for major scenes that they get. And then being that this involved one of their officers, they decided to also have our CID come out as well.
What is CID?
Criminal investigation.
Did you go out there with somebody?
I did.
Who was that?
My Sergeant Fassett,
And would you spell that for Ms. Wood, please?
Fassett.
So did y'all ride in the same car?
No, sir, we did not.
But you got out there pretty much the same time, right?
Yes, Sergeant Fassett, I believe, arrived maybe 15, 20 minutes after I did.
Just in general, did you take photographs out of the scene?
Yes, sir.
And are some of these pretty gruesome photographs that I need to tell my family about?
These are personally?
Some of these photographs,
Oh.
are they gruesome photographs?
Yes.
So that I need to warn them.
Yes, yes.
Okay. And did you also, in preparation for your testimony here today, draw some diagrams and sketches of the crime scenes?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Did you also collect evidence?
I did.
What evidence did you collect?
There was 4 cell phones that was collected, the vehicle. There was 4 shell casings that were at the intersection of Barron and Shepherd. There was a rifle and some live rounds from the rifle. There was 2 pistols and live rounds from those pistols. And then there were several pistol casings that were found a short time later.
Now, did you tell the ladies and gentlemen of the jury what the first thing that you did when you got out to that crime scene was?
The first thing I did was take a walkthrough of the areas to just observe what was obvious physical evidence.
Did you go to the Barron-Shepherd intersection first or Bishop?
Mind if I refer to my report? First started at Bishop.
Other than law enforcement firearms such as a rifle and 2 pistols, did you find any other guns during your inspection of the crime scene that night?
No, sir.
Okay. And did you make a thorough search for any other guns,
Yes, sir.
such as might be involved with the children that were in this car?
Yes, sir.
No guns?
Correct, sir.
Did you find any guns inside the car?
No, sir.
Did you make a physical inspection of the car at some point?
Yes, sir.
Did you notice some bullet defects?
We did.
Okay. Were those bullet defects from outside the car in or inside the car out?
All bullet defects that we found were fired from outside the vehicle and were entering into the vehicle.
So nobody shot from inside that car?
Correct.
Do you know who the two pistols that you obtained belong to?
Yes, sir.
Who?
One was Officer Gross, the other one was Officer Oliver.
Okay. So no guns belonging to any of these young men?
Correct.
All right. So you get to the car, what was the first thing that you did?
Walked around the car just to make a visual examination of the vehicle, observing any items that were obvious.
Did you take any photographs?
I did.
Judge, how do you want me to handle the making sure the rifle's safe?
Members of the jury, if you would please exit the courtroom, go to the sheriff. All rise, please. Thank you. You all may be seated. Just a few housekeeping matters. I would appreciate it if the media, if y'all would broadcast the pictures, post them, or other complaints. Thank you. Out of respect. Second of all, I suspect you're about to get into a whole bunch of pictures, are you not?
Yes.
Okay, and I think you all have shown these to the defense the other day, so I also would like to take up any 403 objections or anything like that outside the presence of the jurors. So what I'm going to ask you to do, Mr. Snipes and Mr. Brissett, to go off the record and show them exactly what it is you're going to offer. Mr. Snipes, I see a box of evidence too, and let's try to get all this stuff taken care of. So let's take a brief recess. Y'all get together. Come on up here if you like. We'll do your pictures first. Mr. Brissett, I think you can see what you've done before. I'll take a look at the pictures and show me which ones you think are objectionable, and I'll give the statement. You don't know when you're ready to lie, Mr. Whaley. Let's go back on the record in the State versus Roy Oliver. The record should reflect that we're outside the presence of the jurors, the lawyers are here, Mr. Oliver is here, Mr. Lewis will be handling this for the state, and Mr. Brissett for the defense. Essentially what we're doing is admissibility of crime scene evidence, a number of pictures were taken, a number of items were collected, including bullets and shell casings, a magazine, and a rifle, and I've asked the parties and they graciously agreed to handle this outside the presence, and so I'm going to admit the following evidence, and I'm sure y'all will please watch my numbers to make sure I get this right. States offered pictures 46 through 220. I'll note for the record that 126 was already admitted. So 46 through 220 are now admitted for all purposes with the following exceptions. The reason why these are the exceptions is because I sustained the defense's objections. The numbers that I've sustained the defense's objections are 64, states 64, 75, 76, 80, 99, 109, 113, and 114. Those particular exhibits are admitted for record purposes at the request of the state. The rifle, as well as all the physical evidence, have arrived at court in envelopes in a box. All of the envelopes or boxes are admitted for record purposes. The items themselves are going to be marked with an A at the end of it. So 229A is admitted for all purposes, which is the rifle.
Judge, we'd object under our Garrity objections earlier in the week. This is a continuing course from the Garrity forward on the hearing.
Okay, I want to make sure I get you on that, Mr.
Okay.
Brissett. Same with those pictures, is that right?
Some pictures at the very end, yes, sir.
Okay. You want to articulate those specifically now?
There are pictures at the end, and we can get the number here in a second, of Officer Oliver taken it approximately, based on the detective's metadata on his photos from his Nikon camera, 5 to 6:30 a.m., more around the 6 o'clock hour on his camera body time of Officer Oliver, and that is post-Garrity. Garrity was issued at 3:20. It's the defense's contention that once Garrity applies, the submission to submitting evidence against oneself has kicked in, and we'd ask that those be stricken.
I need to know what those numbers are.
Yes, sir.
I want you to look at them. Let's do this so we don't forget.
And Your Honor, those are 217, 218, and states 219.
Your objection to 217, 218, and 219 are objections are overruled. And I'll need a running objection to those particular exhibits. The rifle, your objection, I believe you articulated, 229A is overruled.
Okay, and that would apply to an image of it as 216 as well, Your Honor. Same Garrity line of objections we've lodged earlier.
Your objection 216 is overruled. Anything else with regard to the pictures, Mr. Brissett?
No, Your Honor. Just so we can clear up for those grading our papers one day, our objections that you heard off the record for duplicative were 64 through 65, 74 through 82, 99 through 101, 108, 109, 113 through 115 inclusive. And after that, you ruled and gave us the ones that you were excluding.
That's right. Regarding the pictures, is there anything?
No, Your Honor.
Okay.
No further objections.
The rifle 229A, other than your Garrity objections, do you have any objections?
No, Your Honor.
229A is admitted. I'll give you a running objection to that.
Judge, I don't mean to interrupt, but just so I'm clear, I think that we're labeling things that are for the record with the A. So the actual exhibit that's coming in for all purposes would be just a number.
All right.
Is that right?
Thank you very much. So 229 is admitted. 230 through 230 through 233 are 4 casings. State's offered those for all purposes. Mr. Brissett, do you have any objections?
All of our Garrity objections, Judge, we re-urge at this point because Garrity had already applied by the time these were collected. Officer Oliver was at the crime scene with the detective that's now on the stand doing his walkthrough where Garrity information was shared with the members of the Dallas Sheriff's Office prior to the collection.
Your objections to those are overruled, and I'll give you a running objection. State is also offering 12 casings that were recovered, I believe, at the nursing home. That's 234 through 245 inclusive. Is that right, Mr. Lewis?
Yes, Your Honor.
And Mr. Brissett?
No objections.
Those are admitted for all purposes. There is a magazine which is State's Exhibit number 282. The offer is made by the state, Mr. Brissett.
Well, we have at least 7 magazines in my mind that were collected, so if we can have a little bit more, which magazine?
The magazine from the rifle, the 223.
Same objections we had to 229, then, Judge.
All right, your objection is noted and it's overruled. I'll give you a running objection. I've written down 283. I don't know what that is. What is 283, Mr. Lewis?
283 is a live round that was taken from the chamber of the 223 rifle.
Which is State's Exhibit 229. Any objections?
Yes, same Garrity objection, Your Honor.
Those are overruled. I'll give you a running objection. I believe that takes care of the physical evidence. Is that right?
That's correct, Your Honor.
We needed to do the bags for record purposes only.
So 229A, 230 through 245A inclusive are admitted for record purposes only. 282A is admitted for record purposes only. 283A is admitted for record purposes only.
And Judge, we don't have a problem during the break if they want to have the detective go ahead and crack the bags now so we can get the stickers on the small boxes that are in these for these projectiles, if that speeds it along in front of the jury.
Do we have that yet?
No.
Let's do that right now.
Yes, sir.
Please. What's the reasons?